Kevin Smith, it is so good to see you. How are you?
Excellent to see you. So good, so good.
Good.
Above ground, always such a nice place.
Well, listen, you know Toronto loves you big time, so we're so happy to be able to talk to you today. Kev, look, I have been literally interviewing you since Clerks. I know I look 25, but this is the reality, my friend. So we go way, way back. And I'm watching this doc, I'm loving it, and I'm loving going back down memory lane with you. But I was getting quite emotional. So I
Mhm.
can't even imagine what this process was like for you.
Thankfully, it was in capable hands. If I had to make the documentary about my own life, I'm too close to it.
Yes.
Malcolm, my friend Malcolm Ingram, who directed the movie,
Yeah.
who's from right there in Toronto. I met him at the
Yes.
Toronto Film Festival back in 1994 when we were showing Clerks.
Yeah.
Malcolm was able to kind of line it all up. He was very ambitious. He's like, I was like, what part are you going to tell? He's like, I'm going to tell the whole thing. And I was like, how do you tell the whole thing? And he found a way to do it. So I cried at the drop of a hat. I cry when I watch the fucking Flash. So it's not, it's
I'm right
no
there with you.
no stretch to say that like while I watch this movie, first time, every time I
Yeah.
get crazy emotional. Mercifully, we had a storyteller who could focus on actually telling a story as opposed to getting lost in the detail or emotion of it, which I absolutely would have done. So it's going to be embarrassing to admit, but like sometimes I'll wake up 3, 4 in the morning and stuff, not having necessarily anything to do.
Yeah.
And I just smoke weed and watch that documentary and get so removed from it
Yeah.
that I can root for that kid in it. And I'm like, oh, I hope everything works out for this Kevin Smith.
Yeah.
My God, he's so earnest. He really does believe in this stuff.
Well, yeah, but Kevin, I mean, even from the opening, VHS that tape you made to your parents, I mean, that's
Mhm.
amazing. I always say to my kids, you got to keep this stuff for when you become famous, but good on you. But honestly, it's amazing because look, this goes from like day one to today. Excuse me, I can't speak English anymore. There's really nothing that wasn't hidden.
Yeah.
What was the discussion like between you and Malcolm to say was anything off limits? Because I don't think there was.
No, him and Sean, his editor, like sifted through everything. And not mind you, there's all the footage of the movies and previous interviews, and then you're gonna have talking heads from people who
Yes.
get interviewed. But me alone, I think they got like 25 hours of footage of me talking. And like they have to boil that down somehow to 2 hours. And the two of them were absolute geniuses about doing it. And when I watched the movie, first time, I was like, I'm sure there's going to be some stuff missing.
Yeah.
First version of the movie I watched, there were two things that I felt were missing, but you totally could have told the story without. But as I watched it, I was like, I don't know. So when we were making the flick, Malcolm was like, I'm not going to ask about Harvey. And I was like, how do you not ask about Harvey, man? Especially now following you
100%.
too.
Yeah.
And he was just like, because fuck that guy. He made his choices. His life is not your life. And you shouldn't have to ruin your movie by referencing him. And I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, fair enough. So we make the movie. And when I watched the first cut, the only two notes I had from Malcolm was like, I said, Malcolm, I cried watching this. Is beautiful. He was like, are you serious? I was like, yeah, you fucking nailed it. I
Yeah.
was like, the only thing we need to do is I need to put in more stuff about my dad or any stuff about my dad because my dad is the linchpin. That's why I wound up making films. And he's not represented because he's dead. Like my mom's around, so you got
Yeah.
her, but like we
Yeah.
need my dad in there.
Oh, for
And
sure. Yeah.
the other one was I said, I know what the philosophy was about leaving Harvey off the table, but I feel like it's ignoring the elephant in the room. Like I watched the whole movie and I feel like if somebody watches this, they're going to be like, well, way to whitewash it. Where's anything about the Weinsteins and blah, blah, blah. So I was like, in order to make it bulletproof, I think we should go back and add in stuff about Harvey. Like it could just be after we do all the movies, like plop it right in the middle to be like, okay, you like all those movies? Sadly, this motherfucker had something to do with it.
Yeah.
And Malcolm and I had a fight. We've fought many times. We're very close.
Yeah.
But we had this different kind of fight, which was about the content of a movie about my life. So, he was like, well, I said to him, I was like, I think if we put in that's me talking about Harvey, it'll make the film bulletproof. And Malcolm stopped being my friend Malcolm and started being my filmmaker Malcolm. And he was like, well, I think the film's bulletproof already. And I was like, oh my God, I forgot that like
Yeah,
I'm dealing with two people here, not just my
yeah.
friend, but the filmmaker as well. And so we butted heads and didn't talk for a while. We had a big fight about it. And then finally he kind of came around to it where I was like, Malcolm, I'm not trying to take anything out of the movie. Like at one point he was like, you're trying to take over the movie. I was like, no, I'm
Yeah.
not trying to remove anything. I just want to put this in so that nobody says that you whitewashed me and left out the bad part or something
No,
like
you're
that.
right. Yeah.
So that was the only time that like, that we butted heads and where I was like, oh man, but I always had to respect the fact that he had a vision to get the entire story in there.
Yeah.
And it's a long story with a lot of twists and turns and a lot of
Right.
projects. And I trusted him the whole way. And this was the one place where I was just like, let me help you help yourself, and my story in the process.
Mm.
But it worked out, thank God.
Oh,
Thankfully, he was
no, it's
amenable.
brilliant. It's like I said, it's so entertaining and so interesting. And, Kevin, I watch your career and you're right, twists and turns. You had that really high in the beginning at Clerks and Chasing Amy, amazing. And then Mallrats,
Yeah,
and then you're like, okay, whatever,
yeah.
I got to step up. I
It
want to
went
know
like this. It went Clerks, Mallrats,
yeah,
Chasing Amy,
right,
Dogma,
right.
Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, Jersey Girl,
Yeah.
Clerks 2. Like it's like
Yeah,
like
yeah,
Richter
but not
scale.
right, but not just movies. Then you reinvent yourself and you become a brand, and now you're doing interviews for IMDb, and now I'm watching you. We're fellow journalists now and stuff like that. So
Yes.
you're interviewing
I want your
people,
job.
but I'm saying I want yours because you're talking to people like my favorite shows and Walking Dead and this and that, whatever. But anyway, what I'm getting at here is where does that confidence come from when you're so low? How do you pick yourself up and rebrand yourself and make it work?
It's first you have to admit defeat in the short term. Defeat in the long term is a different beast altogether, and that's something you only learn with like a long career. Mallrats comes out in '95 and tanks, and I thought my career was over.
Yeah,
Now Mallrats is like one of my most celebrated films, like after Clerks. And that you
right.
want to talk about a reversal of fortune, like I was there.
Yeah,
I was there for the whole Mallrats experience, and from cradle till grave, and now to its resurrection. And it's crazy. Like you can't predict it. I couldn't have predicted it. All you could do is lean into it. So, I'm always, if you look at my career, particularly in the beginning, like Clerks happens and instantly we set up the next thing, which is Mallrats. Before Mallrats comes out, we had set up the next thing, which was Chasing Amy. And thank God we did, because like if we tried to set up Chasing Amy after Mallrats tanked, nobody was going to listen to us or hear us.
yeah,
So it was always about kind of making sure that like I covered the future. I believed in like, yay, they like Clerks, but I didn't believe in my talent enough
yeah,
to be like, all right, this is manifest. Now it's just going to keep happening. I was always felt responsible for like, keep yourself in the room. And I'd read too many stories about, first time filmmakers who were celebrated and then sophomore jinx kicks in.
right.
And I was desperate to avoid that, but I did not avoid it by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah,
So I learned early on, like within the first 2 years of my career, I learned to be overpraised and love it. And I
mhm,
learned to be overbeaten, the whipping boy,
yeah,
and I realized, look, if I want either, it's going to be the other one. And I
yeah,
realized the truth was probably somewhere in between. Like Clerks isn't as brilliant as some people made it out to be, and Mallrats isn't as garbage as some people made it out to be.
for sure.
They're
Yeah,
just somewhere kind of in there. But it's been difficult. I remember like from time to time, the older you get, the easier it gets. For example,
100%. You
when
don't give a
Yoga
crap
Hosers comes
anymore.
out, like
Yeah,
Yoga Hosers comes around, and I'm like, oh my God, everyone hates it. And then I go, wait a second, this is familiar. Oh, this is Mallrats. This is Jersey Girl. If I just wait 10, 20 years, it's going to find its audience, and nobody but me will remember what
yeah,
happened at the box office.
right. Yeah,
So you
yeah,
just have to, it sounds so stupid and facile, but like you get up, you dust yourself off, you make another thing. And
yeah.
just keep making, like make, and then one day you drop dead. It's that simple.
So well, and thank God you didn't. And I,
Yeah,
when I heard that you had that heart attack, I almost had one because thank God that you're well and doing so great right now. But
thank
so
you.
I just wanted to say that out there. But I have to ask you, after going through this whole process, Kevin, and watching this back and making this, what did you learn about yourself that you never realized before? What was your big aha moment?
Honestly, it was that I wanted to be famous. If you had asked me about young Kevin Smith, because he's a completely different creature and
Yeah.
beast, and I love him to death, but can always speak about him as he's a completely different person because he is. Like, I don't know where the kid found the confidence to think we could get away with all this, but he did. And now I live his life because of that.
Yeah.
And if you had asked me prior to the doc, if like, I wanted to, I remember me in the beginning of my career, I was like, I didn't even consider myself a filmmaker. I was a writer, I was like, and I was so serious, and people would meet me and be like, are you sure you made Clerks? Cause you're so like self-serious and stuff like that. And I thought that I was like earnest artist,
Mm.
but when you watch the doc, like as I'm talking to my parents in that video, I say like, maybe I can bring fame, perhaps I could bring fame to this family name. And then I quickly go like, although that's not important. But in that moment when I watched the doc, I leaned forward because I was like, wait a second.
Mm.
Like, not only did that motherfucker plan for Clerks, he was planning for this incarnation. And I didn't think that. I thought that was something that I did along the way, not young Kevin Smith, who made Clerks. I built on the success of young Kevin Smith and figured out I could be the art project. I'm going to be me for a living. That kid already had fucking ideas about it right at the beginning. And I'll never understand. I know that boy, Bonnie. I knew him insanely well. I was that boy.
Yeah.
And I don't understand why he thought he could do this still to this day. And I've seen it work, but I still don't, I cannot explain the fucking vote of confidence that he suddenly had just because he saw Slacker. And that's
Yeah.
how powerful film could be. What a document for change that movie was, completely unintended by Richard Linklater.
Yeah.
But it made me go like, I could change my life. I think I could do a thing that I've never done before.
Right. Right. You owe Linkletter a lot, huh?
I do, big time. Thankfully, he showed up for the doc.
It was great. It was great. Okay, two more questions that I probably have to wrap because I know you've been talking all day. All right. What did you initially see in Matt and Ben?
First, it was Ben. Like, I knew Ben before I knew Matt. And then Matt, like, Ben just vouched for Matt. And he was such a lovely guy. And he was so well raised. Like, his mom is a teacher. And she was one of those teachers. She was like one, oddly enough, I wound up working on Masters of the Universe at Netflix years later. But his mom was one of the first people that was like, these toys are bad because they're just teaching kids violence and they're just commercial toys. There's no adventure here and stuff like that. So I liked Matt, like when I met him, but Ben had kind of like talked him up. He's like, my boy, Matt. Ben, though, I fell in love with while we were making Mallrats because of who he was on set. He was just an absolute delight. And he remains that person to this day.
Yeah.
He's so funny. Like, Ben is hands down one of the funniest people I've ever met in my entire life. He's incredibly educated, very erudite, but not in a snobby, looking down his nose kind of way. His mom also a teacher and stuff.
Yes.
He spoke my language. Like, he was business savvy. Like, one of our first conversations was he came in for the audition on Mallrats, and I was like, oh, congrats. I read in the trades that you sold a script called Good Will Hunting. You guys have made almost $1 million. And he was like, you read that? And I was like, yeah, I think it's important to know about our business. He's like, I read the trades as well. So I fell in love with them. And he was, like, he was funny, like self-deprecating to a fault. A lot of my personality that people think of as like Kevin Smith, I slowly grifted from early Affleck because I was like so impressed by him.
Right.
But he was totally real. Like, and I make fun of him for it still to this day. And he goes, you took it in a different way than it was meant. But when he was leaving, when he was all done with Mallrats, like anytime he left to go work on Good Will Hunting in Los Angeles, he'd write me a little thank you note for letting him go and stuff. I thought he was so well raised.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
at the end, he's leaving, and he goes, what are you doing when this is all done? We were in Minnesota. And I was like, I guess we're going back to Los Angeles to cut the movie. And he goes, well, I live in Los Angeles. I was like, I know. And he's like, well, you should look me up, man. We should hang out. I'm a good guy. And it's literally the words he said, I'm a good guy. And I thought it was so adorable. I was like, you are a good guy, Ben.
He's a good guy.
And so after that, I did reach out to him, became friends. And years later, he's like, I didn't mean for real I was a good guy. I was being facetious. I was like, no, bro, you were literally making your case and you made your case well.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so to wrap it up, I know you've got so much going on and happening, but we are going to get Clerks 3. What can you tell us about that?
Well, Ben's in it.
Yeah, come
He
on, of
came,
course he is.
he came to
Any
play.
cameos by Jennifer? Or no, we're just
No, we don't know. I don't have a Jennifer cameo. I
okay.
have a Jennifer in the movie, but not that Jennifer. Sorry.
Okay, good.
But believe me, there was a moment where when they got back together, I was like, should I ask? And I was like, you know what? We already
Yes.
played that tune once before.
Yeah.
It is, what can I tell you about it? It is, I just showed it to Adam Goldberg, guy who makes the Goldbergs.
Yes,
He
I
came
love
over to
that
watch.
show.
I love the Goldbergs.
Yes.
And he came on, and he does what I try to do in my work. Like, he makes you laugh, and then he grabs you by the heart, like in the third act.
Big time.
So he came over to watch the flick, and Adam's been like engaged with my career since he was in film school. He's a little younger than me, and he was going to NYU when Clerks hit. And so I was like, oh my God, here's a guy doing what we want to do, talking about things we want to do.
Yeah.
So he's kind of kept track of my career as like, not just a pro, but like kind of a fan. So he came over to watch the flick. And when I came upstairs, like, he was bawling because it's an incredibly emotional movie. I don't know how you'll laugh like crazy, but the whole like last half hour of the movie is incredibly emotional. And it's not just emotional for the story. There's this weird effect that the movie has because of the characters in their age, because this is the third iteration of Clerks. There's this weird, it's going to sound fancier than I mean it, but I've noticed it now in all of our screenings, this weird transference with the cross section of the audience where you stop looking at them and you start thinking about you and your relationship to them. Wow. And how long they've been in your life. And it's, people get oddly emotional, like teary and stuff. So he wasn't expecting that. He was like, I thought I was coming to see Clerks 3, man. He's like, what did you do? And I was like, I know, it's got a little something extra to it. And he gave me the best review that I've loved so far I've gotten on the movie. He goes, this film is better than any Clerks movie has a right to be. And I was like, oh, put that on the poster. So hopefully in the fall, we'll be out on tour with it again, like we were with Reboot. And
you'll
back.
Come to Toronto for sure.
We'll be at the Queen Elizabeth, I bet you.
Awesome. Well, listen, like I said, I could talk to you for hours, but you really are truly one of my faves. Like I said, I've known you for so many years, 30 years. I mean, it's crazy. And I do thank you so much for your time today, Kevin, and just best of luck with this doc. It's not just for the fans. It's for everybody. It's so interesting, so good. And thank you for being so open in it. I really appreciate that.
No problem. Bonnie, excellent talking to you. Great seeing you again. You don't age. I don't age. We're still in this business.
We don't. Thank you so much, Kevin.
See you later. Enjoy Toronto.
Okay, I will. We'll get you back here soon. Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.